What's up, everybody? This is a video I've been meaning to make for a while now, but I've been very busy with the likes of roster editing and doing my deep dives and season previews and stuff, so I'm finally getting around to this one. I'm excited to do this. Pretty heavily requested video here. This is going to be the top 10 trade targets in Madden 19 franchise mode. Now, most of you guys know I'm a sim guy, a realism guy, so these aren't going to be, oh, how can I get Odell Beckham or AJ Green on my team? You know, these are going to be, you are a team who has a hole, and you're looking for a player that another team would realistically be willing to part with. Either their contract is coming up or they're a backup. So we're looking at realistic trades here. This is going to be for the guys looking for an immersive franchise experience. And this is, of course, using my roster with my ratings overhaul. If you are new to that, there is a whole video detailing why that roster is a more realistic experience, and it will impact the trade market here that we're looking at. So we're going to do one player at each position who I think is a really good target if you think that is a position of need for your team. The one thing I will say is this game is not perfect when it comes to valuing these players. So what I'm going to show you is what it took me to get this player in the game based on how the game values it. So if you want to stick to those, you definitely can. I'm also going to mention what I think a realistic trade value for this guy should be, but it's just impossible given the game engine for Madden. And there are ways you can exploit that. You could switch to the other team and make the trade that the game thinks favors the other team. You can edit the overall of the player, maybe change their position so the game allows it. You know, some people may or may not like to do that. For me, I'm just going to tell you what I think a realistic value would be. Sometimes you gotta go around the edges to make realistic moves here. So let's get into it here, starting with the quarterback. And the player we're going to target here is Jacoby Brissett of the Colts. Now, Andrew Luck is back. Jacoby Brissett did a good job for Indianapolis, I thought. He's got a very good Madden card, but I do think he has a nice future ahead, whether it's a really good backup or a potential starter. You know, the difference to me between Jacoby Brissett and like a Blake Bortles, maybe even Teddy Bridgewater, pretty small. So the team I chose to target Jacoby Brissett with was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I want to move on from Jameis Winston. I would even bench him, see what you got in Jacoby Brissett for a year, and then maybe you make a new decision after the season. So in game with my roster, it took a third-round pick to acquire Jacoby Brissett. That is what the Colts gave up, I believe, in real life for him. He showed a nice year. I think that's actually really good value. You don't need to bend any rules to get that done. Next, running back. This one was pretty easy for me. It's Tevin Coleman of the Atlanta Falcons. This team already is paying Devonta Freeman. Tevin Coleman is in the last year of his contract. They have other players to pay here. I do not think they re-signed Tevin Coleman. The team I chose to target him with was the 49ers. I know they have Jerick McKinnon, but they have a lot of cap space, and Tevin Coleman was kind of Kyle Shanahan's guy. He really liked him when he was coaching him in Atlanta. There's a lot of teams that could be a fit here. In game, it took 2 third-round picks to get Tevin Coleman. I don't think that's terrible. I think just a single third-round pick, maybe even a fourth in real life, in terms of his value, because you got to pay the guy, that's a value that I really don't think is well reflected in the Madden trade engine. So then wide receiver, this is going to be the highest overall player we're acquiring today, and it's Marvin Jones, veteran wide receiver for Detroit. Some of you might be wondering why Detroit would be willing to part with him. Well, they have Kenny Golladay, a young player, 6'4", really set to emerge as potential number 1 receiver here. They still have Golden Tate working in the slot over the middle of the field. I think for the right price, Marvin Jones would be available. Now in real life, I think a third, maybe with second round conditions applied to it, would be about his trade value if you want to manipulate it. But in game, it took 2 second round picks and a future 4th to get this one done, which actually isn't too bad. And I chose to do that with the Buffalo Bills, who have a very poor wide receiving core. Next, offensive lineman. Now this market is not very big. If you are a lineman that is capable of starting in this league, there's a good chance you are a starter. There aren't 32 lines in the NFL that are full of starting caliber players, and that's putting it lightly. So the game actually recognized this. I had a really hard time acquiring these linemen. I started with Trent Brown, and that's a name that I think would be the ideal target if you do want to manipulate the game. But I was offering a second round pick for him, and they weren't even close. So the next guy I chose was Hal Vaitai. Started for the Eagles at left tackle, but they have Jason Peters back. He's a guy, Vaitai, that I don't see them paying. They have way too many contracts coming up. The game accepted a third-round pick for Vaitai. I don't think he's worth quite that much in real life. I think he's shown some struggles. He's probably more of a fifth-round guy. And I chose to do this with Seattle, who's just one of many miserable offensive lines in the NFL. Next, defensive interior. This is going to be a team like the Chargers, where you're looking for a good run defender on the inside. Maybe he can rush the passer a little bit, but primarily looking for that big run defender. It's going to be a 3-4 end or a 4-3 D tackle. The guy I started with here was Michael Brockers. I think he's a guy that kind of gets lost in the cap situation in LA, but the game was simply asking way too much. So again, that's a guy you might want to manipulate the game a little bit to try and target. Brockers probably worth about a 3rd or 4th round pick. But the guy we were able to get in game is Vernon Butler. He's a young guy for the Panthers, has shown some very nice things. Not a cornerstone of your defense, but if you are a team who's looking for a good run defender who can also get after the quarterback a little bit, I like Vernon Butler. We were able to get him for the Chargers' 3rd round pick. And then on the edge, these are your exterior pass rushers. There was one team that was very clearly going to be targeted here, and that was the Denver Broncos, who have both Shaquille Barrett and Shane Ray. Now, I started targeting Shaquille Barrett. I could say everything I said about Michael Brockers with Barrett. Ideally, you could get him, but the game simply asks for too much to be realistic. So I went after Shane Ray. They did do it for a 3rd round pick. Now, in real life, I think he's worth a 5th or a 6th, but from the Rams, we traded a 3rd round pick to get that edge rusher. Shane Ray does have a pretty good Madden card, good finesse moves, good speed, all that. Next, linebacker. We've got a couple names here as well. First guy is Anthony Barr. Now, the game was asking way too much, but he's a guy that I do not think Minnesota re-signs. I think he's going to ask for way too much money. That's going to devalue what he should be worth on the trade market, something that's not reflected in Madden. I chose New England to be the team that I targeted trading for a linebacker with. Now, I think Anthony Barr could be had in real life for a 3rd round pick. The game wasn't even close. The next guy I chose is Dylan Cole. Kind of broke out as a really crafty coverage linebacker. Now, the Texans, I think, really like Dylan Cole. I don't think they would necessarily want to trade him, but he's not even a full-time starter here. You've got Benardrick McKinney, who they just paid. Zach Cunningham, a really nice young player on a rookie contract. I think if given a good offer, they would consider trading Dylan Cole. So for a 3rd and future 7th round pick, that is what it's going to take in game to get Dylan Cole, and I don't think that's terrible. I think he's probably worth a 3rd or a 4th round pick. Next, cornerback. This is going to be one a lot of you guys are looking at. Everyone wants good corners. Now, we even had to do a little bending to get this one, but this is just a player that I thought made too much sense. He's buried on the depth chart. He's got injury questions. His contract's coming up. It's Jason Verrett of the Chargers. Now, I actually have my development list, the list of recommended changes I have, and Jason Verrett I recommend to move to normal because of the injury stuff. So he does actually have quick development, which does change his trade value in the game, but if you do go with my recommendations and you make him normal, in game, it's still going to cost you a lot, an unrealistic amount here, but I did want to show what it would take to get Jason Verrett, a 2nd rounder, a future 3rd, and then you can also just throw in the Chargers are looking for a middle linebacker. Just throw in someone that's not going to play. They should accept it. You could even sign a guy off of free agency. You know, that's getting into the manipulation of the game type of stuff, but that's what it took. In real life, we know he's got the injury questions. I don't even know if they logistically are allowed to trade him as he's on the IR, but I don't see Jason Verrett fetching more than a 5th round pick. So if you want to manipulate some things and get that done, go for it. He does have 65 injury on my roster, so you are taking a risk. And then the last guy here, it's going to be a safety. The name I came up with was Monte Nicholson. And there's definitely a good debate to be had about whether or not the Redskins would consider moving Monte Nicholson. Now, here was my thought process on that. He's a good young player, but he was a mid to late round pick. This team does not have a ton invested in him. If the offer was good enough, I don't know why they wouldn't consider it. He's also a pretty similar style player to what they have in DJ Swearinger. They drafted a guy in Troy Apke who I think can play, so I think for the right price, they would consider moving him. And in game, it does take a 2nd rounder, a future 3rd, and a cornerback, just any regular corner should do, to get the guy. In real life, I do think for a late 2nd or an early 3rd, the Redskins might think about it. So this is a guy you're going to want to bring in, use as that strong safety, let him play good run defense, and develop as a cover guy. So that's my list. I'm excited to hear what kind of trades you guys are making in your franchise mode. Some guys I might not have talked about here. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Cheers as always, guys. We'll see you next time.